welcome to my film review of Yesterday. So this, you could refer to this as the Beatles movie. That was certainly what I thought it was when I first heard about it and saw it advertised. But it's not the movie that you probably expect, given that just recently we've had the Queen movie, which is like a biopic about Queen, and then we've had Rocket Man, which is similar but more of a musical. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that here we have a tribute to the Beatles, and that's what it is. It's a nod to the Beatles. It's a tilt of the hat to the Beatles, but it's not the kind of biopic that Queen was, for instance. I thought Queen was utterly sensational, and I didn't realise how much of a Queen fan I was, whereas the Beatles are by far and away my favourite band. They are the greatest band ever, and as this movie has proved, the Beatles are timeless. This movie obviously is depicting Beatles songs being out in today's era, today as things are, modern life, and rightly so, they are portrayed as being a huge hit, which they still are today. If I had kids, I would bring them up on the Beatles. Thank you, Mum and Dad, for making me listen to the Beatles when I was younger and being such a huge fan. So I think I've got it out there that, I'm a huge Beatles fan. And that certainly is helpful for your enjoyment factor of this movie, but I would say it isn't essential. So let me take you through the experience, how this movie is compared to what I thought it would be. So what this movie is you've got... if you've seen the trailer, then you've probably seen the what the movie's about and where it's coming from, the angle that it's coming from, and that will probably give you a pretty accurate flavour of what this movie is, etc. But the one thing I would note is that I think it's very much a comedy, in fact, whereas Queen movie was a movie about Queen, a musical band, and you get to see all the songs beautifully played. This is a comedy that's got the Beatles at its heart, and it's fantastic. It works really well. So it's got more it's got more personal life in than what I thought. So the main character guy, there's a lot of his personal life portrayed in the movie. It's not just all Beatles, because with the Queen movie, for instance, if they were talking about the life of the main character, well, you're interested in them because it's the lead singer of Queen. But because this movie doesn't involve actually any of the characters of the Beatles, it just involves their music being sung by somebody else, you would think that the personal life wouldn't come into the movie quite as much, and it would just be all about the music. And if that's what you're expecting, you'd be a little bit disappointed. So this movie is a third of the Beatles, it's a third comedy, and it's a third this guy's personal life and a story behind it. So, if you're expecting it to be a hardcore Beatles movie, it's absolutely not. It's a comedy that involves quite a lot of a person's personal story being told, a little bit like Billy Elliot sort of thing. One guy's personal struggle and attempt to find his way in life, with a lot of comedy and the Beatles music as its background, as its soundtrack. What more could you want? I love comedy movies. This guy who plays the main character, he plays a fantastic part. Absolutely loved him right from the start. Very likeable. Plays the role really well. You're invested in him. You're rooting for him. He's an incredibly nice, likeable guy. So ticks all the boxes there. A lot of the other characters you don't really know. They're not hugely famous, except for one lady who is from the Ghostbusters. I think she was the recent Ghostbusters movie with the women in. She was actually my favourite character in that, and she's in this, and she plays another brilliant part. So the cast is fantastic. And if you that's the key thing to know. It's a third comedy, a third Beatles. Thank you, tilt your hat, salute to the Beatles, and a third a personal story of one guy's personal story. Like I say, I'm not going to give away what that personal story is, because that's not how my movie reviews work. I like to keep zero spoilers, give you as little detail as possible about the plot so that you can enjoy watching it unfold as you go. But those are the key things to know. It's part Beatles, part comedy, and part his personal story. Now, the comedy element of it was actually quite good. It wasn't like laugh out loud, hilarious, wet yourself laughing comedy. It was, but what it was for most of that movie, I had a huge smile on my face. Now, part of that would be hearing Beatles music being sung, but also it was just the kind of, if you've seen the trailer, the crazy element of the movie. It's absurd, but if you just go with that absurdness and don't question it and think, oh, well, this is just ridiculous, and just roll with it and just ride with it, then the comedy element is really enjoyable, and it continues throughout the movie, and it really is good. It has you laughing and smiling to yourself, and at the very least smiling inside quite a lot throughout the movie. So it worked really well from a comedy element. It was a very heartwarming, feel-good movie. Like I say, it had a smile on my face for most of the movie. And when he is dealing specifically with the Beatles music, I found that incredibly satisfying, but I wanted more. I could have done with the whole movie being about him and the Beatles songs, and I would have loved that. And you get a lot of it early on, and then it's more his personal storyline developing throughout the movie. So, you've got to be careful of setting your expectations for this movie if you're going to get the most out of it. But even though my expectations were slightly different to what I got, I still really, really enjoyed this movie. And like I say, I particularly enjoyed him trying to, him and the Beatles songs, the part of the film that involved those storylines coming together, were particularly enjoyable. And as somebody who didn't grow up with the Beatles, they were before my time, but I'm a huge fan. You could put yourself in his shoes, and I was kind of thinking exactly the same as what he would, going through those exact same struggles of trying to remember all of the songs. Them, but then when you're trying to recite them, how easy would that be? So that was a particularly enjoyable part, and I especially got a kick out of it because of the Eleanor Rigby song. Eleanor Rigby is my favourite Beatles song. Always absolutely loved that. It's got the craziest lyrics, and that was where I constantly had a smile on my face, because I could remember pretty much all those lyrics. It's one song that I learnt quite early on, learnt all the lyrics to that song, and that was covered quite a lot in the movie. That was a integral part of the movie, a particularly key part of the storyline at times, and I got a real good kick out of that. So great movie all round. I give this an 8.4 out of 10. If it was all about the Beatles, it would have been a 10 out of 10, but I love the element of comedy and the element of the Beatles. I got it just right. It kind of, I had lower expectations than normal going into this, because my mum saw it before me. I asked her what she thought, because she is a ginormous, huge Beatles fan, as big a Beatles fan as they come. And she was like, meh, and I was like, a little bit disappointed there. So I kind of went into it thinking this isn't going to be as good as I'd hoped. And it turned out to be brilliant. Like I say, it's not like the Queen movie. It's not like that at all. Hopefully they'll bring one out like that of the Beatles, but just take this as a comedy with the Beatles soundtrack, and I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. Thoroughly enjoyable, well worth an 8.4 out of 10. I think I'm giving it an 8.5. It's going to get an 8.5 out of 10. I'm upgrading it. Just a great movie. Don't need to say any more. Definitely want to see this at the cinema. It's definitely worth seeing. It's a feel-good song. By all means go on the buy one get one frees, but definitely worth seeing at the cinema, and it'll definitely be enjoyable to watch again at home. So go out, see this movie. It's a cracker. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hope you found this movie review useful, and thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next review. Goodbye.